In today's video, I'm going to be talking about tyre dressings and sharing some tips that I've picked up on how to get the best finish and durability out of them. I'll also be sharing some of my favourite tyre dressings, which I think are suitable for different types of tyres and situations, as well as how to maintain them after that initial application. Now, the very first tip that I've got in the first step in the process is to deep clean the tyre as much as possible. So this is just going to remove any old dressings and also any built up grime and dirt that's been soaked into the rubber, and try and pull it out as much as possible so that the tyre dressing that you're going to be applying later on bonds as well as it can. So in terms of the chemical that you can use to deep clean the tyres, there are a few different options. Generally on tyres that aren't very well maintained, I will use a dedicated tyre cleaner, as I find these to be really effective, but they aren't the most economical option as they typically are ready to use. If you're looking for something a bit cheaper, then you can go with something like a citrus or an all-purpose cleaner. You might just need to have a look at what the manufacturers say to use on tyres, or have a little bit of a play about with the dilutions yourself. My favourite brush to give the tyres a really good scrub is the one from the Detail Factory. The bristles are quite stiff but still do have a decent amount of flex to them, so they really do kind of conform to the tyre a bit more, compared to brushes which have sort of really stiff bristles that can skate over the rubber a little bit more. So I usually apply a pre-wash to the wheels anyway, and I will apply this to the tyres, and this does help to pull out some of the grime. But once I've rinsed this down, I'll go in with the chemical, a few sprays on the tyre and a few sprays on the brush, and give it a really good scrub. Once I've rinsed this down, I will repeat the application process to see what kind of colour the foam is turning. If at this point the foam is looking pretty white and clean, then I'll just leave it there, but occasionally if the tyres are really dirty, it might need a second hit, particularly if you're using a chemical that isn't quite as strong. So once I'm done washing the rest of the vehicle and it's time to dry it off, I'll generally use my Blow Air RS car dryer to blast the wheels, as I find this is the easiest way of cleaning this kind of intricate area, and it also is really good for drying the tyres as it does get a lot of the water out the treads, so it stops it running onto the sidewall when applying a dressing, which can make the application process a bit messier and dilutes the dressing as well. There is also the argument that using a dryer like this, where it heats up the air a little bit, is good in winter as it does warm the sidewalls slightly, which can make it more receptive to a tyre dressing. However, from my experience, I haven't found heated air to make a massive difference, as by the time the air actually comes out of the nozzle, it isn't all that warm. The main thing that I think it helps in winter is to just make sure there's no water left in those treads. Alternatively, you can use a wheel and tyre towel. So any small microfiber towel should work well for this. One of my favourites is the Rag Company Gauntlet, which is a 12-inch by 12-inch towel, and it has different colours on each side, so I'll use one for the alloys and then another for the tyre. Even if you do use something like a car dryer or a leaf blower to blast off the wheels, then it is still a good idea to use a microfiber towel just to wipe down the tyres afterwards, as this can help remove any transfer that might be on them from old dressings that might not have been removed during the previous cleaning step. Now the next step is to decide which kind of tyre dressing to use, and I have to admit I do probably put an unnecessary amount of thought into this step, and I'm lucky that I do have a decent collection of tyre dressings to choose from, so I'll just take you through quickly what kind of considerations that I make. So the first way I can kind of break tyre dressings down is into 3 categories, really based on the consistency of them. So there tends to be gel, cream and sprayable loose liquid type dressings. So some classic examples of gel ones are the ones by Valet Pro and the Meguiar's Ultimate Tyre Dressing. Cream dressings tend to be things like Stiana Gloss Gummy, Yum Dress, and also Garage Therapy Tyre Serum seem to fit in this category too, although the latter two do have a thinner consistency which changes the application a little bit. And then finally the ones with a very loose liquid consistency that you would always apply in a spray are things like Carbon Collective Sateen and version 2 of Carscope's Ink Tyre Dressing. Now I'm not a huge fan of gel dressings as I feel like they attract dirt a little bit more, and I also just find the application process a bit messier. I don't like it when I get it all over my gloves, and the applicator is harder to clean with a gel dressing, I think. So generally I'll go with either a cream or a sprayable dressing. I find that the thinner consistency ones, so the ones that lean more to a spray format, are really good for tyres which have loads of grooves in the sidewall. So the Michelin Primacy tyres, for example, generally look a bit better when using a sprayable dressing. The thicker dressings, a bit like Stiana Gloss Gummy, as I find them a bit easier for tyres which have a very smooth sidewall, as they're less likely to leave drips and streaks if you don't get that application process perfect. And the next thing to consider is the type of applicator to use. So generally these fall again into 3 categories. So brushes, microfiber applicators and foam applicators. I usually use foam or brush applicators as I find them a bit easier to clean than microfiber ones, and you can with all types go for really cheap or more expensive options. You can use paint brushes or cut up sponges, or you can use dedicated applicators, which generally feel a little bit nicer to use and can sometimes result in a better finish depending on what dressing you're using as well. Most of the time I use a foam applicator as I find it a bit easier to use with most dressings. It works with both sprayable and cream based dressings. and the foam is good at conforming to the shape of the tyre wall. There is also the option to use a brush, so one that I've used in the past is the Tyre Dressing brush. This generally works better with cream dressings, as with spray dressings it can result in more drips and soak into the bristles of the brush a little bit too quickly. My two favourite foam applicators are the Yum Hex Grip one, which is quite wide, so I prefer this for chunkier tyres, and then I also just use the Interdetailing round sponge applicator for tyres with a lower profile, as I don't want to apply any dressing to the treads, and there's a much higher risk of that when using a big applicator on small tyres. When it comes to actually applying the tyre dressing, a good tip is to start from the bottom and work your way up as you go around the tyre. The reason being is that it's less likely to get drips all over the face of the alloy compared to when you start at the top of the tyre. Having said that, I do usually just start at the top because I always forget this. Once you've worked in the tyre dressing, it's a good idea to leave it about 10 to 15 minutes and then assess the finish. If it looks a little bit too glossy for your liking, then you can knock it back with a microfiber towel, or if you're looking for something a bit more dedicated, then you can use something like the Carscope tyre finishers to just give it a buff back. If however you do want a bit more gloss, then you can apply a second layer. This also can in some cases help with the durability of the dressing, so for a first application of it, it's not a bad idea to use 2 layers, and then you can always knock that second layer back after about 15 minutes if you do find it a bit too glossy. Now, to access the bottom of the tyre to make sure it's fully dressed, I do put the car on rim mats, which raises them on a slight platform to allow me to reach that bottom part without moving the car. Alternatively though, you could roll the car forwards, just make sure you do get her all around that tyre. I like to wait ideally a couple of hours before drying the vehicle after applying a dressing, but in some cases that's not always possible. In that event, I will make sure that I do knock back the tyre dressing with microfiber to make sure that there's not going to be any sling up the side of the car. Now, when it comes to maintenance going forward, I do take a slightly different approach and don't deep clean the tyres every single time before using the dressing. This is something that's especially true when using a tyre dressing that has some protective qualities as well, which was really designed to preserve the tyre wall as well as make it look nicer between washes. So some examples of tyre dressings like this are the Garage Therapy Tyre Serum, Autocon's TT Serum and Yum Dress V2. All of these are really good options and ones that I do use quite frequently. With these, I tend to get a base layer of the product building up, especially after a few applications of it, so there's no real need to deep clean the tyre every time once that base layer has been established. So if you're washing your car every couple of weeks and keeping on top of it, then you can use something like a wheel shampoo or even a regular shampoo depending on how dirty they are, combined with a softer tyre brush like the Detail Factory one to just give them a quick scrub and then top up the tyre dressing as necessary. Once a decent base layer of these dressings has been built up over a few applications, then you should start to notice that the tyres look a lot cleaner between washes and they remain hydrophobic, which you'll probably notice when cleaning the car. So what I'm going to do is pop a link to the products that I've mentioned in this video in the video description, so you can check them out if you're interested. If you have found this video helpful, it would be great if you could drop it a like, and thanks very much for watching.